My name is Jake. I live in Wales near St. David's. I am originally from Canada, but I moved here a few years ago with my wife. Every afternoon I like to go on a run along the coastal cliffs, and my route eventually cuts out onto a road through the countryside. I've done this for the past 2 years without anything weird happening, but about 2 weeks ago I started seeing a reoccurring anomaly. I was going down the usual route, and I was coming up to the bit where I cut onto the road. I looked out to make sure there weren't any cars coming, and to my right was a farmer walking at a steady pace with a gloomy face. But that's not what stuck out at me. The most noticeable thing about him was his frame of over 7 feet. The best way I can describe him is Bertram from RDR2, wearing a green coat, brown Wellington boots, and holding a wooden cane. I smiled politely before continuing my run, but his expression remained the same. I looked back a good few strides later, and he had stopped in his tracks and stared dead at me. When he noticed I was looking, he turned towards a gate next to him and went to open it. I looked back again at the end of the road, and he was still there, but this time peeking around the shrubbery next to the gate, the gloomy expression on his face. When I got home, I told my wife about what I had seen. "Maybe he was just too invested in watching your ass jiggle," she joked. "Mel, I'm serious. Something felt off about him." I murmured as she typed out a work report. The next day on my run, I turned out onto the road. Yet again, the gloomy farmer was approaching me, staring silently into my eyes. I looked back again a few strides later, and he was in the middle of the road, a hunch in his stance. He then turned to the gate and watched me as I ran down the rest of the road. This continued for the next few days until about a week ago. When I decided to change the time, I went out to the early afternoon instead, just to avoid his empty eyes. However, I turned onto the tarmac, and he met me there again. This time not walking and just standing, watching. I met his eyes and stopped, confused as to why he was there. Always when I was on my run, and always the same distance from the gate when I turned the corner from the footpath. He didn't walk towards the gate at all this time, just stood there observing me run, a bit faster than usual, to the end of the road. I decided to go out for a drink at the local pub to take my mind off the farmer. As I ordered a pint of beer, the barman looked over at me. "You look stressed as anything. What's on your mind?" he asked. "Sounds ridiculous. You wouldn't take me seriously." I put a smile on my face. He smiled back very warmly. "I've been a barman for 11 years. I guarantee I've heard worse." "Ah, well, I go on runs, you see, down the coastal path." He nodded, acknowledging me as I spoke. "And for about a week now, there's been this guy, really tall and looking sad. He always walks down the road I turn onto to head home, but today I changed the time to avoid him, and he was still there. Not walking, just staring at me." The warm look on his face dropped into a cold stare of concern and panic. "Stop taking that route. Don't ever go down that road again, you hear me? Ever," he said firmly, a slight shake in his voice. "What? Why?" He cut me off. "I've heard this story a dozen times. It doesn't have a happy ending. I suggest you go home and find another spot to run at." I thought he was joking for a second, but somewhere I knew he was being deadly serious. I finished my pint and set off walking home. It was dusk by the time I got into the country roads outside St. David's, and I used the torch on my phone to guide myself through the darkness. I walked past the junction that I turn out of the farmer's road onto, and took a brief glance down with the light. He was there, standing, an empty expression staring at me. "Shit," I muttered before setting off sprinting down the other road back home. I slammed the door behind me and locked and bolted it as fast as I could. "Mel, something really weird is happening." I explained what had happened. She thought I was joking. She laughed at me. I didn't bother to argue. I just took myself away and went to bed. I woke up suddenly. Looking to my left, my clock read 3 a.m. Looking to my right, my wife wasn't there. Suddenly, I realized I really needed to piss. I got up and knocked on the bathroom door, expecting my wife in there. The door swung gently open as I knocked. Once I was finished, I looked around the house. Mel wasn't anywhere. Then I decided to look out my bedroom window to see if she was in the garden for some weird reason. I took one look out the window and swayed, nearly passing out. He was out there, in my garden. And next to him was my wife, holding the same gloomy expression. He then turned and walked away, followed by Mel. Before I could react, they were gone. I took one look out the window and swayed, nearly passing out. He was out there, in my garden. And next to him was my wife, holding the same gloomy expression. He then turned and walked away, followed by Mel. Before I could react, they were gone. When the police arrived, they took my account of what happened and took a description of what the man looks like. They then looked St. Aouther nervously and told me to try and get some rest, and they would return in the morning, before promptly leaving. Fuck that. I grabbed a head torch and a kitchen knife and set off down to the road where the farmer walks down. I turned the corner to the tarmac and saw him standing alone, dead ahead. "Where is my fucking wife?" I roared at him. He stayed silent, as if I hadn't said anything at all. I walked up and held the tip of the knife to his throat. "Where is she? If you have touched a hair on her head, I will make you wish I had just killed you here." Again, he said nothing. He then promptly turned towards the gate and walked away. I followed him through the gateway and into an open field. After walking from field to field for what felt like hours, he stopped suddenly and spoke. "You aren't supposed to be here." He spoke in a posh, stereotypical upper-class English accent, his deep voice rolling off his tongue. "What? You aren't supposed to be here? Where is my wife? What have you done with her?" "I have done nothing with Melody. I am the gatherer. I simply gather people for him." "For who?" This time I cried out more desperately, the reality setting in. "The Creator. He is the true power." He pointed his cane over to the horizon, the dim light from the sunrise illuminating the silhouette of a farmhouse. He then turned back the way he came. I reached the house in minimal time as I sprinted over, in hope of rescuing the only person in my life who cared about me. "Jake!" I heard a voice cry out from inside the house. Without hesitation, I ran inside. Mel's cries continued, but the door swung shut behind me, and the cries distorted into a deep, demonic laugh. I looked around me as darkness swallowed up the cozy appearance of the house and transformed it into a gloomy abyss. Mel sat on an armchair to my right, an empty look in her eyes. "Mel!" I rushed over to her, forgetting the darkness around me. "Not so fast," a voice called out. An old man was stood opposite from Mel. "I'm going to give you something not many people have once they enter this building, a chance to escape." A door was conjured up behind Mel. "Let my wife go." I spoke coldly at him. "Jacob, your wife is not your wife anymore. She is mine now, and she will gather more people until I have an army of souls large enough to take back the earth, my creation, my child. The last person who I let go now works in a bar of all places, warning people away from me," he chuckled. "But he will be dealt with. Don't make his mistake. Leave and forget what you saw here." I began to walk away, but grabbed Mel at the last moment and pulled her through the doorway onto the grass outside the farmhouse. I sighed as I took in the air. "Mel, we need to get out of here." "Mel?" I looked over at her, but was met with lifeless eyes. That man, he had killed her, taken her soul to stop her escaping. I am writing this today as a final message to the world, a warning. She was my everything, and he took her away from me, and now I will join her. I tied a rope onto my ceiling to hang myself. Even now I can hear the Creator's voice echoing what he told me. She is mine now. Well, I won't let him take me. If you ever see someone following your patterns, waiting for the right opportunity to take you or someone you love, don't give them a chance to take it. Run and don't look back.